Have you ever felt like your emotions are running the show, pulling you in directions you don't want to go? In a world that feels more chaotic by the day, where stress, anger, and anxiety seem to wait around every corner, it's easy to feel like we're at the mercy of our own reactions. But what if I told you there's an ancient way to outsmart those emotions, not by suppressing them, but by mastering them? 2,000 years ago, the Stoics, those sharp-minded philosophers of ancient Rome and Greece, cracked the code on emotional resilience. They didn't just theorize about calmness, they lived it, even in the face of war, betrayal, and personal loss. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled an empire, put it simply, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That power lies in what we might call an invisible toolkit, a set of mental practices so subtle yet so transformative, they can turn emotional chaos into clarity. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Maybe it was a frustrating conversation, a setback at work, or even just the weight of daily responsibilities. Now imagine having a way to step back, observe those emotions without being ruled by them, and choose how to respond. That's the Stoic advantage. Their toolkit isn't about denying feelings, it's about reframing them. It's about recognizing that while we can't control what happens to us, we can always control how we interpret it. This shift in perspective, what the Stoics called cognitive reframing, is like a mental lever that lifts us out of reactivity and into intentionality. And it's just one of the tools they used. Acceptance, another cornerstone of Stoicism, teaches us to distinguish between what we can change and what we must let be. Resilience, their third pillar, turns obstacles into opportunities, transforming adversity into fuel for growth. So why does this matter now in our fast-paced, hyper-connected world? Because the challenges we face today, uncertainty, pressure, constant comparison, aren't so different from what the Stoics faced. Their solutions, though ancient, are startlingly modern. This video isn't just a history lesson, it's a guide to reclaiming your emotional autonomy. Over the next few minutes, we'll unpack these timeless techniques, showing you how to apply them in everyday life. Whether you're dealing with stress, anger, or self-doubt, the Stoic Toolkit offers a way through, not by fighting your emotions, but by understanding them. Ready to discover how these ancient thinkers outsmarted their own minds? Let's begin. The Stoics had a radical idea that still shocks us today. Emotions aren't caused by the world around us, but by how we see that world. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it bluntly, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. Think about that for a moment. It's not the traffic jam that frustrates you, it's your belief that the road should be clear. It's not your friend's criticism that stings, it's your interpretation that their words diminish your worth. This insight is the first tool in the Stoic Toolkit, the power to pause between what happens and how we react and ask, is this event truly harmful, or is it my mind making it so? Let's take a modern example. Imagine two co-workers receiving the same critical feedback. One spirals into self-doubt, convinced their boss dislikes them. The other sees it as a chance to improve, even feeling grateful for the guidance. The feedback didn't change, the perception of it did. That's the Stoic secret. We don't control the words others say, but we do control the story we tell ourselves about them. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing reminders like, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. It sounds simple, but this mental shift is like rewiring your emotional reflexes. Instead of reacting to every spark as if it's a wildfire, you learn to ask, is this actually a threat or just my mind amplifying it? Here's the challenge though, we're wired to blame externals for our feelings. A delayed flight ruins our day. A rude comment ruins our mood. But the Stoics would argue, the flight is just late, the comment is just words. The suffering comes from our resistance, our insistence that reality should conform to our preferences. This isn't about pretending things don't hurt. It's about recognizing that our judgments add layers of pain to the original event. So next time you feel anger rising or anxiety creeping in, pause and ask yourself, am I reacting to what happened or to the story I'm telling myself about it? How often do we hand over our peace of mind without even realizing we had a choice? One of the most powerful tools the Stoics gave us is what they called the Dichotomy of Control. The simple but profound act of sorting life into two categories, what's within our power and what isn't. Epictetus laid it out clearly. Some things are within our control while others are not. Our opinions, desires, and actions, these we command. But our bodies, possessions, reputations, even the actions of others, those lie outside it. At first glance, this sounds obvious, but think of how much energy we waste trying to control the uncontrollable, the weather, other people's opinions, the past. The Stoics realized that emotional turmoil doesn't come from external events themselves, but from our futile attempts to bend them to our will. Take something as ordinary as a traffic jam. You didn't cause it, you can't dissolve it with frustration, and honking won't magically clear the road. The only thing you truly control, your response. You can white-knuckle the steering wheel, or you can use the time to listen to a podcast, call a friend, or simply breathe. The traffic hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. This is the liberating shift. When you stop fighting reality, you reclaim your energy for what actually matters. Seneca, another Stoic giant, put it this way: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. How often do we torment ourselves with what-ifs about things that haven't even happened, or things we couldn't prevent if they did? Here's where it gets practical. Grab a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list the things you worry about but can't control: your boss's mood, the stock market, whether someone likes you. On the other, write what you can influence: your preparation, your effort, how kindly you respond. This isn't about giving up, it's about focusing your power where it counts. The Stoics weren't passive, they were strategic, directing their efforts like archers who know they can't control the wind, but can always adjust their aim. So next time you feel anxiety creeping in, ask yourself, is this within my control? If not, practice the Stoic art of letting go. If it is, take action, not with frantic energy, but with clarity. This single mental filter can quiet the noise of modern life, leaving space for what truly deserves your attention. Because here's the secret: the less you try to control the uncontrollable, the more control you gain over your peace of mind. Now let's talk about one of the most counterintuitive tools in the Stoic toolkit, a practice so surprising it might feel uncomfortable at first. The Stoics called it Premeditation Malorum, or the Premeditation of Evils. Instead of avoiding thoughts of failure, loss, or hardship like we're often taught to do, they actively invited them. Seneca, who faced exile, betrayal, and political turmoil, wrote extensively about this. He advised his followers to regularly contemplate the worst that could happen, not to dwell in pessimism, but to disarm fear's grip. Imagine waking up each morning and asking yourself, what if I lost my job today? What if my loved ones fell ill? What if my plans crumble? At first glance, this sounds like inviting anxiety. But here's the twist: by mentally rehearsing adversity, the Stoics robbed it of its power to shock them. Think of it like an emotional fire drill. When a real fire strikes, panic sets in unless you've practiced exactly what to do. The same applies to life setbacks. A modern example, job insecurity. Most of us fear losing our income, but how many of us actually sit down and plan for it? The Stoics would say, don't just dread it, prepare for it. Visualize the worst-case scenario. Would you update your resume, network more aggressively, cut unnecessary expenses? Suddenly, the monster under the bed becomes a problem with solutions. Seneca put it bluntly, he who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. This isn't about catastrophizing, it's about inoculation. By exposing ourselves to mental hardship in controlled doses, we build immunity to real-life blows. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself that everything he loved, his status, his family, even his own life, was on loan from fate. Morbid, maybe, but it's also liberating. When you accept that loss is possible, you stop clinging so tightly to outcomes. You start appreciating what you have now, precisely because it isn't guaranteed. Try this exercise. Pick a modern stressor, a presentation, a difficult conversation, or even a financial worry. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could realistically happen? Then go deeper. How would I respond? What resources do I have? Who could help me? You'll often find that your worst case is survivable, maybe even manageable. That's the Stoic secret. Resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about knowing you can handle it, because when you've already walked through the fire in your mind, the real flames feel a little less scorching. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, but rather wish that what happens happens the way it happens. Then you will be happy." This is the essence of Amor Fati, the Stoic practice of not just accepting fate, but loving it. It's not about passive resignation, it's about recognizing that every twist, every setback, even every failure, carries the seeds of something valuable. The Stoics believed that life's obstacles aren't interruptions to our path, they are the path. And this mindset shift from resisting reality to embracing it is what separates frustration from freedom. Think about how we typically react to unexpected setbacks. A job offer falls through, a relationship ends, a project fails. Our first instinct is often to rage against the unfairness of it all. We replay scenarios in our heads, thinking, if only this hadn't happened. But the Stoics would ask, what if it happened for a reason you can't yet see? Take a failed project, for example. In the moment, it feels like a disaster, time wasted, effort squandered. But what if that failure taught you a skill you'd later rely on, or steered you toward a better opportunity? The Stoics didn't just tolerate these moments, they trained themselves to look for the gift hidden within them. Here's where Amor Fati becomes practical. Imagine you're stuck in a job you dislike. The modern approach might be to resent the situation or escape into fantasies of a better future. The Stoic approach. First, accept that this is your reality right now. Then ask, what can I learn here? How does this prepare me for what's next? Friedrich Nietzsche, who later echoed this idea, called it, making every it was into a thus I willed it. That's the power of loving fate. It transforms you from a victim of circumstances into an active participant in your own growth. Can you recall a setback that later helped you? Maybe a rejection freed you for a better fit, or a mistake taught you a lesson you've used ever since. The Stoics would say those weren't accidents, they were invitations to grow. Because when you stop fighting reality and start working with it, you unlock a quieter, steadier kind of strength, one that doesn't depend on everything going right, but thrives no matter what happens. Imagine standing in the middle of a heated argument. Your heart races, your face flushes, words start bubbling up, ready to erupt. Now picture this. Instead of being swept up in that storm, you take a step back in your own mind. You observe your anger like it's a weather pattern passing overhead, not something that is you, but something you're experiencing. That's the essence of cognitive distancing, one of the most powerful tools in the Stoic Toolkit. Marcus Aurelius perfected this through his daily journaling, writing lines like, "You are just a little soul carrying around a corpse," a blunt reminder that even our strongest emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. Here's how it works in practice. When someone insults you, the raw sting of it feels personal, immediate. But what if you paused and asked, is this insult true? Does it define me, or is it just noise like thunder in the distance? Cognitive distancing creates that pause, a mental space between stimulus and response where choice lives. The Stoics called this prosauch, or attention to the present moment. It's not about suppressing anger or pretending you don't feel it. It's about recognizing that anger as separate from your core self. Think of it like watching a play. You wouldn't leap onto the stage to stop the villain. You're in the audience, observing the drama unfold. That slight shift in perspective changes everything. Let's break down that argument example. Your partner says something that triggers you. Without distancing, you might fire back, escalating the conflict. But with Stoic awareness, you notice the heat rising in your chest, the urge to retaliate, and instead of acting on it, you name it. This is defensiveness. That simple act of labeling creates space. Suddenly, you're not the emotion, you're the observer of the emotion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." By practicing this detachment, you train your mind to respond rather than react, to choose rather than explode. Try this next time frustration flares. Picture your emotions as clouds drifting across the sky, intense, maybe, but always moving. The sky doesn't cling to them, it lets them pass. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop identifying with every emotional gust, you gain the clarity to navigate storms without being capsized by them. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Emotions are data, not directives. They're signals, not sentences. And the moment you realize you hold the gavel, not the gavel itself, you reclaim your power to choose wisely. The Stoics recognized something profound about human suffering, that much of it comes not from lacking what we need, but from endlessly craving what we don't. Epictetus, who lived in an era as materialistic as our own, drew a line between two kinds of desires: natural ones like food and shelter, and unnatural ones, those manufactured by comparison, status, and the illusion that happiness lies just one purchase away. He called this the discipline of desire, and it's perhaps the most radical tool in the Stoic toolkit. While modern culture screams that more is better, the Stoics whispered a counterintuitive truth: freedom begins when you stop wanting what you don't already have. Consider how often we tie our peace of mind to external markers: a bigger house, a newer phone, a higher salary. We tell ourselves, if only I had X, then I'd be happy. But the Stoics noticed a pattern. Each fulfilled desire just births a new one, like a hydra growing two heads where one was cut off. Seneca, who witnessed Rome's elite drown in luxury, wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." That craving, the unnatural desire, is what fuels the emotional roller coaster of envy, dissatisfaction, and endless striving. The antidote: training yourself to desire only what aligns with your deepest values and to meet everything else with indifference. This isn't about austerity or self-denial. It's about discernment. Take social media as a modern example. Scrolling through curated highlight reels, we might crave someone else's vacation, relationship, or career milestone. But the Stoic would ask, is this desire natural? Does it serve my growth? Or is it artificial, planted by comparison? Epictetus advised his students to regularly ask, what is mine and what is not? That question alone can dismantle the illusion that happiness lies in externals. Because here's the paradox: when you stop craving things you don't control, you start noticing the abundance you already hold. Try this exercise today. Pause when you feel that familiar tug of "I want." Maybe it's a new gadget, praise from a colleague, or even validation from a stranger. Ask yourself, if I never get this, will I still be okay? That simple question reveals how much power you've handed to an external. The Stoics weren't against enjoying life's pleasures. They simply refused to be enslaved by them. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial wealth, slept on the floor to remind himself that comfort is optional, not essential. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life." So what do you crave that doesn't truly serve you? The answer might surprise you, because when you peel back the layers of conditioned wanting, you often find something startling: the freedom to choose, not chase. The Stoic discipline of desire isn't about having less, it's about needing less. And in that space between want and need, you'll find a quiet kind of power, the ability to walk through the world without being pulled by every passing current. Seneca once observed, "Anger is like a falling rock that breaks itself upon whatever it hits." That vivid image captures something crucial about our emotional reflexes. When we react without thinking, we're the ones who end up shattered. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They recognized that between any event and our response, there's a hidden space, a pause where freedom lives. And in that pause, we find the power to choose rather than simply react. Consider how social media amplifies this challenge. You scroll past a post that triggers you. Maybe it's a divisive political comment or a snarky remark about something you care about. Your fingers fly to the keyboard, crafting a fiery reply. But here's what the Stoics would ask: what happens if you wait 5 seconds? In that brief window, something remarkable occurs. The heat of the moment cools just enough for clarity to emerge. You might realize the comment wasn't even directed at you, or that responding won't change the other person's mind. It'll only drain your energy. Seneca warned, "No plague has cost the human race more than anger." And today, that plague spreads at the speed of a click. This isn't just about avoiding arguments. It's about reclaiming agency over your emotional life. Think of a time someone cut you off in traffic. The immediate surge of irritation feels automatic, inevitable. But what if, instead of honking or tailgating, you took those 5 seconds to breathe and ask, "Does this person's action define my day, or can I let it go?" The Stoics called this prosoph, the practice of mindfulness that creates a buffer between the world's chaos and your inner peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." That calm isn't passive, it's a deliberate pause where wisdom overrides impulse. Here's how to make it practical. Start small. Next time your phone buzzes with a frustrating message, don't reply immediately. Set it down, count to 5. In that pause, notice the physical signs: the tightened jaw, the quickened pulse. Then ask, what's the most constructive response here? Sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's a measured reply, but it's always a choice, not a reflex. The Stoics didn't eliminate anger, they outmaneuvered it by refusing to let it dictate their actions. Imagine applying this to everyday tensions: a coworker's criticism, a child's defiance, even your own self-doubt. That 5-second pause becomes a mental sanctuary, a place where you're no longer at the mercy of external triggers. Because here's the truth no one tells you: reactions belong to the moment, but responses belong to you. And in that distinction lies an entire philosophy of emotional freedom. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journal to be read by anyone, least of all by millions centuries later. Those private pages, now known as meditations, were his nightly ritual, a place where the most powerful man in Rome untangled his emotions like threads from a knotted skein. This was Stoic journaling at its purest, not mere diary keeping, but emotional alchemy, the transformation of raw feelings into wisdom. The Stoics understood something modern psychology now confirms: writing forces clarity. When emotions swirl chaotically inside us, giving them shape on paper is like shining a light into dark water. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming becomes manageable. Here's how it worked for Marcus. Each evening, he'd reflect on the day's disturbances, a senator's betrayal, a logistical failure, his own frustrations. Then, with deliberate strokes, he'd dissect them. Today I was annoyed by X, he'd write, but is X truly within my control? And if not, why expend energy resisting it? This wasn't venting, it was interrogating his emotions. By putting words to his reactions, he created distance, turning subjective heat into objective observation. That distance is where growth happens. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. Unwritten emotions shout accusations from the gallery, but journaling invites them to the witness stand, to be examined, cross-examined, and either dismissed or learned from. Let's make this practical. Try this Stoic prompt tonight. What disturbed me today and why? But don't stop at the surface. Dig deeper. If traffic angered you, ask, was it the cars or my expectation that commutes should be effortless? If a coworker's tone stung, probe, did their words truly diminish me, or did my own insecurities amplify them? This kind of writing reveals patterns. Over time, you'll notice the same triggers: perceived disrespect, thwarted plans, unmet expectations, and realize these aren't external problems, but internal habits of interpretation. The magic lies in the how. Stoic journaling isn't a rant into the void, it's a dialogue with your wiser self. Epictetus advised his students to write as if giving counsel to a dear friend. That shifter from "why is this happening to me" to "how might I view this differently" changes everything. Picture two versions of the same entry. One reads, "My boss criticized me, she's so unfair." The other, "My boss criticized 3 specific points. 2 were valid, 1 wasn't. I'll improve where I can and let go of the rest." See the difference? One keeps you stuck, the other propels you forward. For modern skeptics who think ancient journaling sounds quaint, consider the science. Studies show expressive writing reduces stress, improves decision-making, and even strengthens immunity. The Stoics didn't have fMRI scans, but they grasped the neuroscience instinctively. Translating emotions into language engages the prefrontal cortex, quieting the amygdala's alarm bells. It's why venting into a pillow feels good temporarily, but writing with purpose brings lasting relief. So tonight, before sleep, take 10 minutes. No fancy notebook required, just honesty. Start with that simple prompt, then let the questions flow. What did I assume about this situation? Was that assumption true? What would my calmest self advise? You're not just recording the day, you're retraining your mind, because as Marcus proved, the pen can be mightier than the sword, especially when the battle is within. Marcus Aurelius often sat alone at night, staring at the stars, imagining himself floating high above the earth, not as an emperor, but as a mere speck in the cosmos. He called this practice the view from above, a mental exercise where you pull back far beyond your immediate frustrations until the entire scope of human existence shrinks to the size of a grain of sand. In his private writings, he mused, "Think of the vastness of time and space, of how many empires have risen and crumbled, how many lives have flared and vanished. And here you are, distressed because someone spoke harshly to you at dinner." That shift in perspective wasn't meant to diminish life's value, but to reveal what truly deserves our emotional energy. Think about the last time you lost sleep over something trivial. A passive-aggressive email, a missed parking spot, a snub at a party. Now imagine viewing that moment from 10,000 feet. Literally, picture your tiny figure in that office chair or that crowded room, dwarfed by streets, cities, continents, oceans. How small does that grievance seem now? The Stoics weren't asking us to deny our feelings, but to contextualize them. As Marcus wrote, most of what we say and do is not essential. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That question cuts through the noise of modern life like a scalpel. This practice isn't about escapism, it's about clarity. A student stressed over exams might zoom out. In 5 years, will this grade define me? A couple locked in a petty argument might ask, when we're old, will this disagreement even be remembered? The view from above doesn't erase problems, it sorts them. It separates the mountains from the molehills by forcing one brutal but liberating question: will this matter in a year? Often the answer is no, and when it is yes, like a health crisis or a betrayal, the same perspective steals you. Even then, you're part of a vast human tapestry where suffering and resilience are universal. Here's the irony: while modern technology connects us globally, our worries have never felt more insular. Social media amplifies every slight. Notifications turn minor hiccups into emergencies. The Stoic antidote is to regularly step into that cosmic vantage point. Try it now. Close your eyes and envision the earth as a pale blue dot swirling in darkness. On its surface, billions of people are laughing, grieving, striving, each convinced their drama is central, and yet the universe remains indifferent. That's not nihilism, it's emancipation. When you grasp how fleeting your moment is in the grand scheme, you stop sweating the small stuff. You start reserving your passion for what truly lasts: kindness, growth, the connections that outlive you. Marcus knew this better than anyone. As emperor, he faced wars, plagues, and betrayals that could have consumed him. Instead, he returned to the stars, writing, "Remember how tiny the earth is in the cosmos. How brief a speck of time is given to you." That shift didn't weaken his resolve, it sharpened it. Because when you stop pouring energy into what won't matter, you free yourself to fight for what will. So next time a minor annoyance threatens to hijack your peace, take a breath and zoom out. The stars will still be there, silent and vast, ready to remind you, this too shall pass, and most of it far sooner than you think. The Stoics had a radical vision of human connection long before modern science confirmed it. They called it sympatheia, the idea that we're all threads in the same vast tapestry. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher, illustrated this with his famous circles of concern. Imagine yourself at the center of a series of rings. The innermost circle is you, the next your family, then friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, and finally, all of humanity. The practice gradually draw those outer circles inward, treating strangers as neighbors and neighbors as kin, until the distinction between us and them softens. In a world fractured by division, this ancient exercise feels startlingly urgent. Think about the last time someone cut you off in traffic. Your instant reaction might have been frustration, even anger. Now imagine realizing that driver is a sleep-deprived parent rushing to a sick child, or a stressed worker late for their shift. The Stoics would argue that person isn't an obstacle, they're you under different circumstances. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire spanning countless cultures, wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." He didn't just tolerate diversity, he saw it as inseparable from his own well-being. This mindset flips conflict on its head. When someone disagrees with you politically or hurts you personally, instead of reacting with defensiveness, you might ask, how is this person's pain or fear a reflection of our shared humanity? Modern psychology echoes this wisdom. Studies show that when we humanize others, seeing their struggles, hopes, and vulnerabilities as mirroring our own aggression melts into empathy. The Stoics took it further. They believed that harming another literally harms oneself because we're all part of a greater whole. Picture a clenched fist striking water. The water yields, but the fist gets wet. Resisting this interconnectedness, they argued, is like a foot refusing to cooperate with the body. It only cripples the whole system. Here's where it gets practical. Next time you're in a tense conversation, pause and silently acknowledge 3 things you share with the other person: a need for respect, a fear of failure, a desire to be understood. That tiny shift from adversary to fellow traveler can diffuse hostility before it ignites. The Stoics didn't pretend this was easy. Hierocles admitted his circles required daily contraction, a deliberate stretching of empathy's muscles. But the payoff, less inner turmoil, because every interaction stops being a battle and starts being a collaboration. Consider social media's echo chambers, where algorithms reward outrage and flatten nuance. What if, before replying to a polarizing post, we asked, how would I speak to this person if they were sitting across my kitchen table? The Stoic answer: you'd listen. You'd seek common ground, not because you've surrendered your values, but because you recognize that bridges serve everyone better than barricades. This isn't about becoming a doormat, it's about becoming wise. Justice and boundaries still matter, but they're applied with the precision of a surgeon, not the fury of a storm. Epictetus, who endured slavery, put it plainly: when someone treats you badly, ask yourself what good or harm they think will come of it. Once you understand, you'll pity them rather than rage. That pity isn't condescension. It's the realization that cruelty is its own punishment, a sign of broken sympathia. So tonight, try Hierocles' exercise. Sketch those concentric circles in your mind, then pull one person from an outer ring closer: a colleague you clash with, a stranger you've judged. What changes when you see their actions not as personal affronts, but as fragments of a story you might have lived under different skies? The Stoics promised something profound. The more you widen your circle, the quieter the world becomes. Because when everyone belongs, very little feels like a threat, and everything feels like a chance to grow. Marcus Aurelius faced invading armies, political betrayals, and chronic illness, yet his private writings reveal not despair, but a startling perspective. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This cryptic phrase holds the key to the Stoic art of alchemy, turning obstacles into fuel. For the Stoics, every barrier, a lost job, a broken relationship, even exile wasn't just something to endure, but raw material for transformation. Seneca, Rome's foremost Stoic thinker, experienced this firsthand when Emperor Claudius banished him to Corsica for 8 years. The island was rugged, isolated, far from the intellectual salons of Rome. A lesser mind might have crumbled, but Seneca he called exile, an opportunity to study philosophy undisturbed, producing some of his greatest works there. His letters reveal no self-pity, only sharpened focus. Wherever I go, I carry my own tools. This mindset flips conventional wisdom on its head. Most of us see obstacles as stop signs, roadblocks preventing us from reaching our goals. The Stoics saw them as detour signs, redirecting us toward paths we might have otherwise missed. Take a modern example: an artist rejected from gallery after gallery. The conventional response might be frustration or giving up. The Stoic response: use the rejection as motivation to refine their craft, build an independent following online, or discover a niche no gallery serves. The obstacle, the closed doors, becomes the very thing that pushes them toward innovation. The magic lies in 3 mental shifts. First, acceptance, recognizing that resisting reality only burns energy. Seneca didn't waste time pleading for recall from exile. He embraced his new reality. Second, reframing, asking not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What can this teach me?" When a storm destroys a farmer's crops, it's a disaster, unless that farmer starts learning drought-resistant techniques, making the next storm less devastating. Third, action, using the obstacle as a catalyst. Marcus Aurelius didn't just philosophize about his hardships. He wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the hindrance to our acting." Here's your challenge. Pick one current struggle, a difficult boss, financial stress, even loneliness. Now ask, how could this very problem be secretly serving me? Maybe the boss's criticism is honing your resilience. Maybe the budget crunch is sparking creativity with limited resources. Maybe solitude is creating space for self-discovery. The Stoics weren't naive optimists. They were pragmatic alchemists, turning leaden setbacks into golden growth. History brims with examples. Beethoven's deafness forced him to hear music through vibration, revolutionizing composition. Mandela's prison years became his education in reconciliation. Even Darwin's chronic illness, often debilitating, gave him uninterrupted time to develop his theories. The common thread: they didn't just overcome their obstacles, they metabolized them, using the friction to spark something new. So next time life throws a boulder in your path, remember Seneca in exile or Marcus on the battlefield. The boulder isn't just something to climb over, it's raw material to build with, because the ultimate Stoic truth is this: the very thing blocking you might be the stepping stone you didn't know you needed. Imagine waking up one morning and deliberately choosing discomfort, skipping breakfast, walking in the rain without an umbrella, or sleeping on a thin mat instead of your plush mattress. To most of us, this sounds like unnecessary suffering, but for the Stoics, it was a masterclass in emotional strength. They called it voluntary discomfort, the intentional practice of hardship to inoculate themselves against life's inevitable blows. Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who defied Julius Caesar, took this to extremes. He wore plain, threadbare robes in an era of Roman opulence, walked barefoot through snow to toughen his resolve, and even slept in the same bed as his soldiers during campaigns, refusing special treatment. His contemporaries mocked him, but Cato understood something profound. By willingly embracing discomfort, he was building a kind of emotional callus, a resilience that would protect him when real adversity struck. This might sound archaic, but the principle is startlingly modern. Think about how addicted we've become to comfort: thermostats set to perfect temperatures, meals available with a tap, entertainment streaming endlessly to distract us from even a moment of boredom. Yet studies show that our tolerance for discomfort has plummeted, while anxiety and depression rates soar. The Stoics would argue these aren't unrelated. When we insulate ourselves from all hardship, we become emotionally brittle, like muscles that atrophy without exercise. Voluntary discomfort is the antidote, not because suffering is virtuous, but because it teaches us that we're capable of far more than we think. Start small. Take a cold shower instead of a hot one. Leave your phone behind during a walk. Skip the snooze button and rise immediately. These aren't acts of self-punishment. They're microdoses of resilience training. Each time you choose discomfort voluntarily, you prove to yourself that inconvenience won't break you. Seneca, who amassed great wealth yet practiced poverty regularly, wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days to be content with the scantiest food, with rough clothing, saying to yourself, 'Is this what I feared?' That question cuts to the heart of the practice. Most of what we dread isn't the actual discomfort, it's our fear of it. By facing it head-on, we disarm that fear. Modern science backs this up. Researchers found that people who voluntarily endure cold exposure like ice baths, report not just increased pain tolerance, but improved mental clarity and reduced stress. It's as if the body learns, if I can handle this, I can handle anything. The same applies to emotional resilience. When you deliberately step away from constant stimulation, no screens, no snacks, no distractions, you rediscover an ancient truth. Contentment isn't found in comfort, but in self-mastery. So here's the challenge. What comfort could you temporarily give up? Maybe it's caffeine for a week, or the elevator at work, or even the cushioning in your shoes. The goal isn't to make life harder, but to reveal how much softer we've become and how much stronger we might be. Because when you willingly step into discomfort, you're not just building resilience, you're reclaiming a fundamental truth the Stoics knew well. Happiness isn't the absence of hardship, but the ability to thrive within it. Long before mindfulness apps and meditation cushions flooded the market, the Stoics were practicing a raw, unfiltered version of staying present. No bells, no guided sessions, just the unflinching discipline of anchoring themselves in the now. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, put it bluntly: don't let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. That weapon, the ability to fully inhabit the moment without being hijacked by regrets of the past or anxieties of the future. Consider how different this is from our modern relationship with time. We scroll through yesterday's memories on social media while worrying about tomorrow's deadlines, splitting our attention so thinly that the present becomes a blur. The Stoics would call this a kind of self-betrayal, a refusal to engage with the only moment we ever truly control. This one, Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders to himself like, confine yourself to the present, not as a passive surrender, but as an active reclaiming of attention. Imagine standing in line at a coffee shop, your fingers twitching toward your phone to fill the silence. The Stoic alternative: notice the warmth of the cup in your hands, the hum of conversation around you, the simple miracle of being alive in that ordinary instant. This isn't about dismissing planning or reflection, it's about refusing to let them eclipse the now. Epictetus used a striking metaphor: life is like a banquet, and the present moment is the dish being served. If you're busy lamenting the appetizers you missed or fretting over desserts yet to come, you'll starve in the midst of plenty. Modern psychology confirms what he intuited: chronic distraction erodes well-being. Studies show that our minds wander nearly half the time, and that wandering is linked to unhappiness. The Stoic remedy: a daily, here and now check-in. Not an hour-long meditation, but something far simpler, pausing 3 times a day to ask, where is my attention right now? If it's tangled in what-ifs or if-onlys, gently guide it back, not with judgment, but with the patience of a gardener tending unruly vines. Here's how this plays out in practice. You're stuck in traffic, late for a meeting. The modern reflex is to rage at the clock, blame the city's infrastructure, or drown in shame about poor time management. The Stoic response: first, acknowledge the reality. I am here in this car, moving slowly. Next, assess control. Can I change the traffic? No. Can I use this time? Absolutely. Maybe you listen to an audiobook, call a relative you've been neglecting, or simply observe the way sunlight filters through the windshield. The situation hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has, because you've shifted from resistance to presence. What makes Stoic mindfulness unique is its lack of ceremony. No incense, no mantras, just a relentless return to what is. Seneca described it as owning yourself, a state where your mind isn't borrowed by past grievances or future fantasies. In an age of endless notifications, this might be the ultimate rebellion, the refusal to let your attention be auctioned off to the highest bidder. So tonight, as you lie in bed, try this Stoic exercise. Instead of replaying the day's mistakes or scripting tomorrow's challenges, sink into the weight of your body on the mattress, the rhythm of your breath, the quiet darkness around you. This is where philosophy meets the pulse, not in lofty abstractions, but in the quiet art of being here. Epictetus once warned his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just clever wordplay, it was a radical philosophy of restraint in an era as noisy as our own. The Stoics viewed speech not as a right to be exercised constantly, but as a tool to be wielded with precision. Imagine a blacksmith's hammer. Used carelessly, it damages both the workpiece and the hand holding it. Used skillfully, it shapes raw metal into something valuable. The same applies to our words. In a world where social media rewards hot takes and oversharing, where every fleeting thought becomes a tweet and every minor grievance a public spectacle, Stoic silence isn't weakness, it's the ultimate power move. Consider how often we speak simply to fill space, nervous chatter during awkward pauses, gossip to bond with colleagues, or angry tirades we later regret. The Stoics called this lalia, or idle talk, and saw it as an emotional leak. Every unnecessary word, they believed, drains a bit of our inner stillness. Contrast this with modern digital habits, posting half-formed opinions for instant validation, arguing with strangers in comment sections, or broadcasting personal struggles to thousands of casual observers. Seneca observed, "Speech is the index of the mind." What does our compulsive sharing reveal about our need for external approval? There's a hidden strength in knowing when to hold your tongue. Take Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome during constant political intrigue. His private journals show meticulous self-reminders. Say only what is necessary and in few words. In palace halls where a misspoken phrase could spark rebellions, his restraint wasn't timidity, it was tactical, or Epictetus' famous teaching. If someone speaks badly of you, don't defend yourself, just live in such a way that no one believes them. Imagine applying that to online criticism today. Instead of firing off defensive replies, what if we let our actions do the talking? This isn't about never speaking up. It's about distinguishing between noise and necessity. A Stoic might ask 3 questions before opening their mouth. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? If any answer is no, silence becomes the wiser path. Think of a time you regretted speaking in anger versus a time you chose quiet dignity, which left you stronger. Social media conditions us to believe visibility equals value, that if we don't declare our thoughts, they don't matter. The Stoics offered an antidote, the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth isn't measured in likes or retweets, but in the unshakable peace of a mind that doesn't need constant validation. Try this experiment today. Before sharing an opinion or complaint, pause. Ask yourself, what changes if I keep this to myself? You might find that most impulses to speak are just habits, the mental equivalent of fidgeting. And in that space between impulse and action, you'll discover something extraordinary, the power to choose not just your words, but your freedom from needing to speak at all. Seneca once wrote to his friend Lucilius about a peculiar exercise. He asked him to step outside his villa at night and really see the stars. Not just glance at them, but truly take in their brilliance, their distance, their silent, steady presence. When was the last time you marveled at this? He pressed. That question cuts to the heart of Stoic gratitude, an intentional pause to recognize the ordinary miracles we've stopped noticing. The Stoics didn't reserve thankfulness for grand gestures or windfalls. They practiced it as a daily discipline, finding wonder in the basics, breath in the lungs, bread on the table, a safe place to sleep. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings by listing these unremarkable gifts. When you rise, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. In an age of endless wanting, this mindset isn't just quaint, it's revolutionary. Consider how modern life trains us to overlook the foundational. We groan at a slow internet connection, but forget the marvel of instantaneous global communication. We complain about meal prep while billions lack clean water. Seneca called this the poverty of desire. When we're so fixated on what we lack, we become blind to what we hold. His letters are filled with reminders to appreciate the mundane, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of a friend's laughter, even the ability to stand up without pain. True wealth, he wrote, is wanting what you already have. This isn't passive contentment, it's active recognition that joy lies in the overlooked corners of our lives. Here's how to make it practical. Tonight before sleep, try the Stoic gratitude list but with a twist. Instead of generic entries like family or health, drill down to specifics. The way your child's hair smells after a bath, the crunch of autumn leaves underfoot, the fact that you have a bed with clean sheets, a luxury most humans throughout history never knew. Seneca advised his students to count your coins this way daily, not to tally possessions, but to rediscover their value. Modern science confirms his wisdom. Studies show that detailed gratitude journaling rewires neural pathways, reducing stress and boosting resilience. There's a hidden challenge in this practice, though. Gratitude isn't just about listing positives, it's about confronting the temporary nature of everything we cherish. The Stoics paired thankfulness with Memento Mori, the reminder that all things fade. Why? Because knowing your favorite coffee mug could shatter tomorrow makes you hold it more gently today. That colleague who annoys you, imagine their chair empty next month. Suddenly, petty grievances dissolve. Seneca put it starkly, hold everything dear but nothing tightly. This dual awareness, both of abundance and impermanence, is what makes Stoic gratitude so piercingly alive. So ask yourself, what's one ordinary thing you'd miss desperately if it vanished? The hum of your refrigerator, the weight of your dog's head on your knee, the ability to read these words, that's where your practice begins. Because when you start seeing the invisible infrastructure of your happiness, the things so constant they've become background noise, you'll realize something astonishing. You've been rich all along. You just forgot to count your coins. Epictetus offered a paradox that still challenges us today. When you are fond of a thing, remind yourself that what you are fond of is not that thing, but of the kind of thing it is. What did he mean? That we can and should cherish what we have without demanding it last forever. This is the Stoic art of non-attachment, pouring yourself fully into the game while holding the score lightly. Picture an Olympic sprinter. She trains for years, giving everything to her craft, yet on race day, she knows the medal isn't hers to claim. It depends on the weather, her competitors, 1,000 variables beyond her control. What she can control, the purity of her effort. The Stoics would call this the difference between process and outcome, between the joy of running and the illusion that happiness lies only at the finish line. Now apply this to your own life. Maybe you've poured heart into a project only to watch it stall, or prepared meticulously for a job interview, then didn't get the offer. The modern reflex is to equate failure with personal worth. If I didn't succeed, my effort was wasted. The Stoic reframe, the value was in the doing. Epictetus put it sharply, if you want your children or your spouse to live forever, you are a fool because you want what's not in your power. His point wasn't to avoid love or ambition, but to love wisely, to pursue goals without shackling your peace to their achievement. Consider a musician releasing an album. The Stoic approach wouldn't be indifference, it would be passionate creation paired with radical acceptance. She can't force listeners to love her work, but she can pour authenticity into every note. She can't control critics, but she can choose whether their words define her. This duality, full engagement, zero entitlement, is the heart of non-attachment. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor, writing, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it away. There are brambles in the path, then go around. That's all you need to know." No drama, no despair, just clear-eyed adaptation. Here's the practice. Pick something you're striving for: a promotion, a relationship milestone, a creative breakthrough. Now ask, can I want this without needing it? Not as resignation, but as liberation. The athlete who runs for the love of movement will always have that joy, medal or not. The writer who treasures the act of crafting sentences will never be at the mercy of bestseller lists. This isn't about lowering standards, it's about raising resilience. Because when you stop conflating results with worth, you unlock a paradox. The less you cling to outcomes, the more freely you can pursue them. So next time you catch yourself thinking, "This must happen for me to be happy," remember Epictetus' warning. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. The race isn't yours to win, but the running, that's always yours. Epictetus dropped a bombshell that still rattles cages today. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in the eyes of others. That's the Stoic stance on reputation in a nutshell, not as something to chase, but as potential collateral damage on the path to integrity. Imagine two paths diverging in the woods of your daily choices. One is well-trodden, lined with nodding approval and social media likes. The other is quieter, marked only by the footprints of your own convictions. The Stoics would call this the difference between character, what you are when no one's watching, and reputation, the ever-shifting reflection of you in others' eyes. Think about how much energy we pour into curating our digital personas, crafting the perfect caption, agonizing over a post's reception, deleting tweets that don't get enough engagement. Now contrast that with Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet wrote in his private journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." That paradox is the heart of people-pleasing. We'll betray our own values to avoid a stranger's frown, silence our truths to dodge controversy, or wear masks so long we forget our own faces. The Stoic antidote, a ruthless prioritization of inner alignment over external applause. Consider a modern workplace scenario. You're in a meeting where the boss proposes an unethical shortcut. The room nods along, but your gut twists. Speaking up risks ridicule or retaliation. Staying silent preserves your likability. Here's where Stoic integrity kicks in. Epictetus would ask, is your silence a choice or a surrender? Not every battle needs fighting, but every compromise leaves a mark on your soul. The Stoics weren't advocating reckless defiance, they were teaching discernment. Sometimes integrity means vocal dissent, other times it's quietly updating your resume while maintaining outward professionalism. The key is knowing the difference between strategic silence and self-betrayal. Social media cranks this tension to 11. Every like is a microdose of validation. Every critical comment feels like a personal referendum. But scroll through your feed with Stoic eyes, and you'll notice something startling. The people obsessed with their online image often seem the least at peace. Why? Because reputation is a shapeshifter. It morphs with every audience, leaving you exhausted from performing endless versions of yourself. Character, though, that's your North Star. It doesn't fluctuate based on who's in the room. As Seneca warned, a crowd cheers or hisses, but neither changes the weight of gold. So here's the challenge. Can you recall a moment you chose authenticity over approval? Maybe it was rejecting gossip to protect someone's dignity, or admitting a mistake when you could have blamed others. That flicker of discomfort you felt, the Stoics would call it growing pains, because every time you honor your inner compass despite external pressure, you're doing something radical, building a self that no amount of praise can inflate and no criticism can deflate. This isn't about dismissing feedback or living in defiance. It's about calibration. Imagine your values as a sundial, unmoving, grounded, marking time by something greater than fleeting opinions. Reputation is the weather vane atop the barn, spinning with every cultural wind. The Stoics asked, which one do you want to navigate by? Because here's the secret they knew. The more you anchor to character, the less reputation storms can shake you. And ironically, the less you chase approval, the more respect you earn, not as a performer, but as someone who can't be bought. There's a stubborn myth that Stoicism is about shutting down emotions, that to be Stoic means to be cold, detached, even indifferent to human suffering. Nothing could be further from the truth. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who spent his reign battling wars and plagues, wrote plainly in his private journal, "Kindness is mankind's greatest delight." Not duty, not obligation delight. For the Stoics, emotional mastery wasn't about suppressing feelings. It was about clearing away the static of uncontrolled reactions so compassion could shine through undistorted. Think of a lake. When the surface is churned by wind, you can't see the depths. But when the water's calm, you see everything. The fish darting below, the stones glimmering on the bottom. That's the Stoic secret. True empathy requires clarity, not chaos. Consider how anger or anxiety distorts our ability to help others. A doctor in the emergency room doesn't scream alongside a panicked patient. She grounds herself so she can think clearly and act decisively. The Stoics argued the same principle applies to everyday kindness. When a friend shares their pain, our instinct might be to match their distress, to spiral with them. But is that truly helpful? Emotional contagion isn't empathy, it's doubling the suffering. The Stoic alternative: meet their pain with steady presence. Listen deeply without being swept away. Offer support from a place of calm strength rather than shared despair. As Epictetus put it, what's the point of moaning when you could be helping? What's the use of turning pale when you could be thinking clearly? This isn't about emotional detachment, it's about emotional precision. Picture two parents comforting a child with a scraped knee. One dissolves into tears, amplifying the child's fear. The other stays calm, cleans the wound gently, and reassures with steady warmth. Both love deeply, but one channels that love effectively. The Stoics recognized that uncontrolled emotions often drown out our best intentions. Seneca, who tirelessly counseled friends through crises, wrote, "A mind disturbed can't perceive the truth, just as a storm-tossed sea becomes opaque." His letters overflow with tenderness, not despite his stoicism, but because of it. By mastering his own inner turbulence, he became a clearer vessel for others' pain. Here's the paradox: the less you're hijacked by your own reactions, the more space you create to hold someone else's. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that caregivers who practice emotional regulation, nurses, therapists, even parents, burn out less quickly and provide higher quality support. Their calm isn't indifference, it's a renewable resource. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily. Amidst the pressures of empire, he reminded himself, "When you wake up, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil, but I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, so I can't be harmed by them or angry at them." That shift from judgment to understanding is the foundation of Stoic compassion. So ask yourself, how might your emotional mastery serve others today? Maybe it's listening without interrupting when a colleague vents. resisting the urge to one-up their story with your own. Maybe it's staying patient with a child's tantrum instead of mirroring their frustration. Or perhaps it's simply being the calm in someone else's storm, not by numbing yourself to their pain, but by offering the gift of undistracted presence. Because here's what the Stoics really understood: the strongest kindness isn't sentimental, it's steadfast. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is keep your own flame steady so others can borrow your light. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that contained a startling question. What would you do if you had just 1 year left to live? Not as a morbid fantasy, but as a clarifying lens. The Stoics called this Memento Mori, the practice of remembering death, not to dwell in fear, but to sharpen life's edges. Imagine holding an hourglass where the sand represents your remaining days. Most of us live as if the sand will never run out, filling our hours with distractions and deferring what matters. The Stoics flipped this script by keeping mortality in view. They magnified the value of each moment. Seneca put it bluntly, life is long if you know how to use it. That's the paradox confronting life's brevity doesn't shrink time. It expands your capacity to inhabit it fully. Consider how differently we approach a weekend when we know it's our last in a beloved city versus just another Saturday. We savor the coffee, linger in conversations, notice the play of light on familiar streets. Memento Mori applies that same urgency to ordinary days. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Not as a threat, but as a compass. When a colleague's petty criticism stings or social media beckons with empty scrolling, the question cuts through the noise. Is this how I'd spend my time if I knew it was limited? Here's where it gets practical. Set a weekly reminder, perhaps Sunday evening, to ask Seneca's question. If I had 1 year left, what would change? Not the bucket list fantasies, but the real adjustments. Maybe you'd finally have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, or stop postponing creative work for someday, or simply sit with your family without checking your phone. The exercise isn't about appending your life, but revealing where you've been living on autopilot. A modern example: the entrepreneur grinding 80-hour weeks for a future payoff might realize their last year wouldn't be spent in a spreadsheet, it'd be spent reconnecting with neglected friendships or watching their child's soccer games. The magic lies in the contrast. We often confuse busy with meaningful, mistaking motion for purpose. Memento Mori strips away the illusions. Epictetus advised his students to live as if attending a banquet. When the host passes you a dish, take your portion politely. When it's withdrawn, don't cling. Life's banquet is always in motion. Relationships shift, opportunities fade, youth slips away. The Stoics weren't teaching resignation, they were teaching reverence. By remembering the temporary, we stop hoarding moments like misers and start spending them like artists. Try this tonight. Before sleep, picture yourself 1 year from now, reflecting on the time between. What choices will you wish you'd made? What grudges released? What risks taken? The answer isn't a to-do list, it's a mirror. Because when you stare into it long enough, you'll start noticing something extraordinary. The sand is still falling. And every grain is yours to hold or let slip. Marcus Aurelius once observed a simple truth about nature that holds a mirror to our own struggles. Time is like a river made up of events which happen, and its current is strong. No sooner does anything appear than it is swept away, and another comes in its place, and will be swept away too. What looks like a meditation on impermanence is actually a masterclass in patience. The Stoics saw time not as an enemy to race against, but as a teacher whose lessons unfold at their own pace. Consider how a river reshapes a canyon, not through force but through persistent flow. That's the essence of Stoic endurance, the quiet understanding that some transformations can't be rushed, no matter how fiercely we want them. Take something as universal as skill building. Imagine two people learning to play guitar. One practices frantically for a week, grows frustrated by slow progress, and abandons the instrument. The other embraces the daily discipline, knowing calluses will form, chords will eventually ring clear, and clumsy fingers will find their rhythm, but only if given time. The Stoics would point to the second learner as embodying patientia, their term for endurance that's active rather than passive. This isn't about waiting idly, it's about showing up consistently while trusting the process. Epictetus, who compared life to steering a ship through storms, reminded his students, "No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen." Now apply this to modern long-term goals: saving for retirement, repairing a strained relationship, or recovering from an injury. The common thread: each requires tolerating the discomfort of incremental progress. The Stoic approach here is twofold. First, focus only on the next small, actionable step: today's guitar practice, this month's savings deposit. Second, release death grips on timelines. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." In other words, impatience often stems from resisting the natural tempo of growth. A sapling doesn't resent its slow ascent toward the sun, it simply turns its leaves toward the light each day. So where might you need more patience right now? Perhaps it's with a child struggling to master math, a creative project that refuses to click, or even your own emotional healing after a loss. The Stoics would urge you to ask, am I frustrated because this truly isn't working, or because it isn't happening on my schedule? Their secret wasn't gritted teeth and white-knuckled waiting. It was aligning expectations with reality. Like a farmer who plants in spring without digging up seeds daily to check progress, they understood that some forces, trust, mastery, reconciliation, operate on invisible clocks. There's profound freedom in this shift. When you stop measuring progress by arbitrary milestones and start valuing the integrity of your daily effort, you disarm impatience's power to derail you. The guitar learner celebrating each clear chord isn't denying the years ahead, they're finding joy in the now. As Seneca advised, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Your current challenge isn't an obstacle to the life you want. It's the very ground that life is growing from, and that's worth enduring. The Stoics might be famous for their solemn wisdom, but here's something history often overlooks: they were hilarious. Seneca, the philosopher who counseled emperors and survived exile, had a razor-sharp wit he used to slice through life's absurdities. Picture this: a wealthy Roman complains about his cramped villa, and Seneca deadpans, "You're not poor because you have little, but because you crave more, and that's a poverty no palace can cure." That's Stoic humor in action, not just jokes, but jabs that puncture pretension and expose the ridiculousness of human angst. While modern culture often frames Stoicism as stone-faced endurance, the truth is, these thinkers wielded laughter like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting away tension to reveal the lighter truth beneath. Consider how often we inflate minor frustrations into catastrophes. A delayed flight becomes a personal vendetta. A spilled coffee feels like cosmic injustice. The Stoics would have chuckled at our dramatics. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned his enslavement into a masterclass on freedom, once mocked his students for groaning about bad weather. You'd pray for rain if you were a farmer, yet curse it as a traveler. So is the sky wrong, or your expectations? His humor wasn't dismissive. It was a mirror held up to our fickle demands that reality conformed to our whims. This is the heart of Stoic comedy, recognizing that life's annoyances are often tragedies we're scripting in our heads, not on the stage of actual events. Now contrast this with what we might call toxic seriousness, the modern habit of treating every inconvenience as a crisis, every disagreement as a battle. Social media thrives on this, turning minor differences into full-blown wars of outrage. The Stoics would have rolled their eyes. Marcus Aurelius, even amid leading Rome through plague and war, joked in his journals about the absurdity of human pride. Alexander the Great and his muleteer both ended up in the same grave. So much for empire. His laughter wasn't escapism, it was perspective. When we take ourselves too seriously, we shrink our resilience. But when we can laugh at our own follies, we regain agency over our emotional weather. So here's the challenge. What's one situation currently stressing you out that could use a dose of Stoic levity? Maybe it's a micromanaging boss. Imagine Seneca whispering. He barks orders like a small dog yapping at chariot wheels. Does the chariot stop? Or perhaps it's social anxiety. Picture Epictetus grinning. You think they're judging you. They're too busy worrying you're judging them. The goal isn't to trivialize real pain, but to separate legitimate concerns from self-inflicted melodrama. The next time you feel your pulse quicken over something trivial, channel your inner Stoic stand-up comedian. Ask, is this truly a disaster or just a future story I'll laugh about? Because here's the secret they knew. Humor doesn't undermine wisdom, it makes it stick. A lesson wrapped in a laugh isn't just easier to swallow, it's harder to forget. And in that space between the chuckle and the insight, you'll find something unexpected. The quiet power to choose lightness over heaviness, one witty observation at a time. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who turned philosophy into street-level wisdom, cut straight to the heart of our modern malaise. The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. That razor-sharp insight exposes the hidden cost of our endless wanting, not just the clutter in our homes, but the mental static that drowns out peace. The Stoics didn't preach minimalism as an aesthetic trend. They practiced it as emotional warfare against dissatisfaction. Imagine your mind as a crowded room where every unnecessary desire shouts for attention. The latest gadget you can't afford, the vacation you're comparing to Instagram highlights, the promotion that might finally prove your worth. Stoic minimalism starts with a radical question. Which of these voices is truly yours? Consider how contemporary life bombards us with manufactured needs. Ads whisper that happiness lives in the next purchase. Social media equates busyness with importance. Even self-improvement culture can become just another form of hoarding. More books unread, more courses unfinished, more goals stacked like unopened boxes in the attic of our ambitions. Musonius took aim at this illusion. If you accomplish something good with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. If you do something shameful in pursuit of pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly, but the shame endures. That's the Stoic litmus test. Does this desire expand your freedom or chain you to external validation? Let's make this brutally practical. Open your closet and count the unworn clothes. Check your phone for unused apps. Notice how many tabs your browser has open right now. This isn't just physical clutter, it's decision fatigue in tangible form. Every redundant object or commitment is a tiny mental tax, a fragment of attention diverted from what truly matters. The Stoics knew what science now confirms: willpower is finite. When we exhaust it on trivial choices, which shoes to wear, which streaming service to binge, we have less left for the choices that shape our character. Here's the experiment. For the next week, track how often you reach for something to fill rather than fulfill. Scrolling when bored, shopping when anxious, snacking when restless. These aren't needs, they're emotional band-aids. Musonius would call them unnecessary wants, distractions from the real work of self-mastery, the paradox. As you strip away the excess, you don't feel deprived, you feel lighter. Like removing rocks from a backpack on a long hike, each released desire frees energy for the journey ahead. So ask yourself today, what's one thing physical, digital, or psychological you can remove to gain peace? Maybe it's clearing a shelf and keeping it empty as a visual pause. Or muting a chat group that fuels comparison. Or even deleting that half-finished project you've been guilt-tripping yourself over. The Stoics weren't prescribing austerity. They were pointing to a profound truth. Every subtraction of the non-essential is an addition to your sovereignty. Because in the space between want and need, you'll find something startling yourself unburdened. Cato the Younger walked into the Roman Senate one day wearing a tunic so threadbare his colleagues laughed. But here's what they missed. That frayed fabric wasn't poverty, it was a manifesto. In an empire drowning in corruption where politicians traded principles for power, Cato's refusal to conform wasn't just personal style, it was Stoic integrity in action. He once said, "I begin to speak only when I'm certain what I'll say isn't better left unsaid." That's the power of a Stoic role model. They don't just preach principles, they live them so vividly their very lives become lessons. Take Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. Before he was a philosopher, he was a merchant who lost everything in a shipwreck: his cargo, his wealth, his entire livelihood. Stranded in Athens with nothing, he could have drowned in self-pity. Instead, he wandered into a bookstore, stumbled upon Socrates' teachings, and had an epiphany. What if losing everything was the gift that forced me to find myself? That resilience, the ability to turn disaster into rebirth, is why the Stoics called such figures prokopton, those who progress. They weren't mythical heroes, they were flesh and blood people who chose courage when easier paths beckoned. Now consider Epictetus, born a slave, beaten so severely by his master that he limped for life. Yet when asked how he endured, he replied, "If someone tried to take control of your body, you'd fight to the death." So why do you hand over your mind so easily? His life was a masterclass in distinguishing what we can control, our judgments, from what we can't, external circumstances. These figures weren't perfect, they had tempers, flaws, blind spots, but their power lies in their humanity. They show us that Stoicism isn't about becoming unbreakable statues, but about learning to mend the cracks with wisdom. So how do you choose your own Stoic exemplar? Start by asking, who in history or even in your life embodies the traits you most admire? Maybe it's Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire but never let power corrode his self-reflection. Or perhaps it's someone closer, a grandparent who weathered hardship with quiet dignity, a teacher who stood firm against peer pressure. The key is specificity. Don't just admire their strength, study their choices. How did they respond to betrayal? What did they do when no one was watching? When Seneca faced execution, he didn't plead for mercy. He calmly revised his will and comforted his weeping friends. That's the Stoic ideal, virtue so ingrained it outshines even death. Your role model isn't a pedestal to gaze at from afar, they're a mirror. When you hit a crossroads, ask, what would Cato do when pressured to compromise? How would Zeno pivot after failure? Their lives are blueprints not for imitation but for inspiration, because the real question isn't who's your hero. It's who are you becoming in their light? Marcus Aurelius scribbled a note to himself that cuts through the noise of modern productivity culture. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's the heart of the Stoic discipline of action, not grand declarations or performative busyness, but quiet, consistent deeds that align with your deepest values. Picture two carpenters. One spends his days polishing tools, rearranging his workshop, and debating the perfect wood finish. The other, with worn hands and sawdust in his hair, builds houses where families will live. Both are technically working, but only one is creating something that outlasts the moment. The Stoics would call this the difference between motion and meaning, between filling time and fulfilling purpose. Consider how often we confuse activity with achievement. Meetings about meetings, emails that spawn more emails, tasks that feel urgent but leave no lasting trace. Seneca saw this 2,000 years ago when he warned, being busy is a form of laziness, lazy thinking. He wasn't condemning hard work, but spotlighting the danger of substituting motion for direction. The modern equivalent, chasing productivity hacks while neglecting the harder question, productivity toward what? A Stoic approach flips the script. Before acting, they'd ask, does this serve virtue? Does it help others? Will it matter when I'm gone? 3 questions that separate wheat from chaff in the harvest of our days. Here's where it gets practical. Think of your last week. How many actions were reactions responding to others' agendas, putting out fires, feeding the endless maw of immediacy? Now contrast that with one deliberate choice that aligned with your core principles. Maybe it was the patience you showed a struggling coworker instead of snapping, or the hour you stole back from Netflix to work on a neglected passion project. Marcus Aurelius called these quiet good deeds, the unheralded moments where character becomes action. No fanfare, no gold stars, just the silent satisfaction of knowing your hands built something true. This discipline shines brightest under pressure. Imagine you're overwhelmed at work, deadlines looming, inbox overflowing. The modern reflex is to frantically multitask, sacrificing depth for the illusion of control. The Stoic alternative: pause, breathe, ask, what's the one thing only I can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? Then do that with full presence. It might mean ignoring 20 urgent emails to finish the report that actually moves the needle, or choosing to listen fully to a team member's concern instead of pretending to while mentally drafting your reply. These are the choices that compound into a life of impact. So here's your challenge as the screen fades. Before day's end, identify one action that bridges the gap between your ideals and your reality. Not a lofty 5-year plan, but today's tangible step. Teach a skill instead of hoarding knowledge. Create rather than consume. Choose depth over distraction. As the Stoics knew, greatness isn't found in grand gestures, but in the quiet accumulation of days lived on purpose, one intentional deed at a time. When emotional storms hit, the Stoics didn't just weather them, they had a first aid kit of mental tools ready to deploy. Picture this: you're in the middle of a panic spiral, your heart racing, thoughts tumbling like rocks in a landslide. 2,000 years ago, Epictetus offered a shockingly simple fix: take a deep breath. Not as empty advice, but as neuroscience before its time. Slowing your breath signals safety to your nervous system, dialing down the fight or flight response. The Stoics paired this with a mental mantra: this isn't a catastrophe, it's my interpretation that feels catastrophic. That shift from reacting to observing creates just enough space to regain footing. For moments when anger flares hot and fast, Marcus Aurelius left us an emergency brake. Ask yourself, what's the story I'm telling about this? Imagine your coworker takes credit for your idea. Before firing off that furious email, pause, breathe, then dissect the narrative. Are you framing this as a personal betrayal or a chance to clarify contributions? The event stays the same, the lens changes. Seneca took it further with his pause and measure technique, visualizing your lifespan as a single point on cosmic timescale. Will this matter in a year? Shrinks most provocations to their true size. Now let's build your Stoic crisis cheat sheet. First, physical grounding, 3 deliberate breaths, feeling your feet on the floor. Next, cognitive reframing. Is this harmful or just uncomfortable? Then, perspective widening. How would my wisest self handle this? Keep it simple. Stoicism works best when stripped to essentials, like a mental Swiss Army knife. But here's the secret no ancient text spells out. Tools only work if you reach for them. That's why the Stoics journaled relentlessly, not to record events, but to rehearse responses. They knew emotional first aid requires drilling before the emergency. So tonight, pick one technique to test on a minor irritation, a delayed train, a rude comment. Try the breath, try the reframe. Notice what happens when you swap autopilot for intention. The real question isn't whether these tools work, it's whether you'll trust them enough to use them when your palms are sweating and your pulse is loud in your ears. Because that's when philosophy stops being theory and starts being the rope that keeps you from falling. Epictetus dropped a truth bomb about relationships that still stings today. If you want to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in the eyes of others, especially those you love. That paradox, that deep connection requires loosening our grip, is the heart of Stoic love. Imagine holding a handful of sand, clenched tight, and it slips through your fingers. Open your palm and it rests there undisturbed. The Stoics argued the same applies to people. The more we demand others conform to our expectations, the more we suffocate the very qualities that drew us to them. Consider how often we enter relationships with invisible checklists. A partner should text back promptly, remember anniversaries instinctively, or share our political views perfectly. When reality inevitably diverges, we experience what the Stoics called propathiae, those initial flashes of disappointment before they're amplified into full-blown resentment. Epictetus offered a radical alternative. Begin each day by telling yourself, I shall meet the interfering, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, and unsociable. Not as cynicism, but as preparation. By preemptively accepting that everyone, including those we adore, is gloriously imperfect, we disarm disappointment's power to poison our connections. Modern conflicts reveal this brilliantly. Picture a couple fighting because he forgot their date night again. The Stoic move isn't to swallow hurt silently, but to ask, is my pain coming from his forgetfulness or from my story that this means he doesn't care? Detachment here isn't indifference, it's the space to separate facts from interpretations. Maybe his memory lapses stem from childhood ADHD, not lack of love. Maybe her insistence on perfect recall mirrors her father's impossible standards. Relationships don't fracture over actions, but over the meanings we assign them. This reframe transforms arguments into archaeology digs. Instead of "you always" accusations, Stoic detachment asks, what ancient wound is this touching? When a friend's cancellation triggers disproportionate hurt, it might reveal your fear of abandonment more than their unreliability. Marcus Aurelius modeled this with his famously turbulent wife Faustina, writing, "She's being difficult. Then I'll practice patience. She's jealous. I'll examine my own boundaries." His focus wasn't on changing her, but on mastering his own responses, the only thing ever truly within his control. Yet here's the twist. This very detachment fosters deeper intimacy. By releasing the fantasy of perfect compatibility, we create room for real connection. Think of a gardener who doesn't rage at roses for having thorns, but learns to appreciate both. A Stoic approach to friendship means loving the actual person, not the improved version you're scripting in your head. When your extroverted partner drags you to parties, you can either resent their energy or admire what you lack. When your messy sibling leaves dishes in the sink, you can nag or recall how their creativity saved your childhood boredom. Detachment becomes the ultimate relational superpower when paired with what the Stoics called philostorgos, a unique blend of affection and clear-eyed realism. Imagine two trees growing side by side. Their roots intertwine underground, but above the surface, each reaches skyward in its own direction. No choking vines of dependency. No demands to grow identical leaves, just mutual support that honors separate growth. That's Stoic love, close enough to shelter, free enough to breathe. So tonight, try Epictetus' dinner table experiment. As you sit with loved ones, silently note their quirks, the way they chew loudly, dominate conversations, or avoid eye contact when stressed. Then ask, could releasing my irritation here actually deepen our connection? Often, what we label as flaws are just the flip side of strengths. The same intensity that makes them stubborn also fuels their loyalty. The distractibility that frustrates you is the curiosity that once fascinated you. The Stoics promised something radical. When you stop trying to rewrite people, you start truly seeing them, and that's where love begins. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." This wasn't empty encouragement, it was the Stoic blueprint for transforming obstacles into endurance training. Imagine a marathon runner at mile 20, legs burning, lungs screaming. Every instinct tells them to stop, but they press on, not because the pain disappears, but because the purpose outweighs the discomfort. That's Stoic perseverance in motion, not the absence of struggle, but the clarity to see beyond it. What separates Stoic endurance from mere stubbornness is intentionality. A mule pulling a cart shows persistence, but the Stoics championed something far more powerful, purposeful persistence. Take Seneca's own life, exiled to Corsica under brutal conditions, stripped of wealth and status. Yet in letters to friends, he reframed this punishment as opportunity. Wherever I am, I carry within me the tools to build a meaningful life. His hardship became the whetstone that sharpened his philosophy. Modern parallels abound. The writer collecting rejections while honing their craft, the entrepreneur facing bankruptcies before finding traction, the single parent working nights to give their child better opportunities. The common thread, they all understood that valleys aren't detours from the path, they are the path. This mindset requires two mental shifts. First, distinguishing between suffering, passive misery, and struggle, active growth. Picture two students preparing for medical exams. One drowns in self-pity over sleepless nights, resenting every page. The other embraces the grind, knowing each hour compounds into future competence. Both feel the same fatigue, but only the latter transforms it into fuel. Second, regularly revisiting your why, what Seneca called the causa endurendi, the reason for enduring. A firefighter charging into flames doesn't focus on the heat, they focus on the lives at stake. Similarly, connecting daily struggles to deeper values, whether it's providing for family, mastering a craft, or serving a cause, turns grit from a sacrifice into an investment. Consider the marathon metaphor through a Stoic lens. The race isn't won through speed alone, but through rhythm, knowing when to push and when to pace. Ancient Stoics visualized life as an archer's challenge. You can control your aim and effort, but not the wind or moving targets. Modern psychology confirms this approach. Studies on deliberate practice show top performers aren't those who endure the most hours, but those who pair effort with strategic reflection. A pianist repeating scales mindlessly for 8 hours gains less than one who focuses intensely for 2, analyzes mistakes, and adjusts. Perseverance without purpose is just exhaustion in disguise. So here's the pivotal question: what's your marathon? Not the fleeting discomforts, the traffic jams and minor rejections, but the worthy struggles that demand your sustained effort. Maybe it's rebuilding trust after a betrayal, or maintaining sobriety one day at a time, or nurturing a creative project that may take years to find its audience. The Stoic secret lies in recognizing that these long games aren't punishments. They're the very arenas where character gets forged. Seneca put it bluntly, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds blow against it." Those winds, the setbacks, delays, and frustrations aren't opposing your growth, they're ensuring it. The next time you face a challenge measured in months or years rather than hours, try this Stoic reframe. Visualize your future self looking back at this moment, not with relief that it's over, but with gratitude for what it built. Because the ultimate reward of endurance isn't just reaching the finish line, it's becoming someone who could. So here we are standing at the end of this journey with an invisible toolkit that's been tested for centuries. Perception, the lens that lets us separate fact from fiction. Control, the compass that directs our energy only where it counts. Resilience, the fire that turns setbacks into fuel. And presence, the anchor that keeps us grounded in the storm. These aren't abstract ideas, they're mental muscles waiting to be flexed. The Stoics didn't just stumble upon these tools, they forged them in the fires of real hardship, from exile to war to personal loss. And here's the kicker, they work just as powerfully today. That argument that left you seething, perception reframes it, the traffic jam stealing your peace. Control redirects it, the rejection that stings, resilience transforms it. The distraction pulling you from what matters, presence reclaims it. Marcus Aurelius left us a parting gift, a metaphor for the unshakable calm these practices build. Build your inner citadel. No storm can touch what you've fortified within. That citadel isn't made of stone, but of daily choices. The choice to question your first reaction. The choice to focus on effort over outcome. The choice to find the gift hidden in the obstacle. The choice to show up fully, even when the world feels fragmented. But here's where philosophy meets the pavement. You don't need to master all of these at once. Start with one. Maybe today you'll catch yourself spiraling over a problem and ask, is this as bad as I'm making it? That's perception at work. Or perhaps tomorrow, when plans crumble, you'll list what's still in your hands rather than raging over what's not. Hello, control. Each small win stacks until one day you realize emotional chaos doesn't rule you anymore. You've outsmarted it. If these ancient strategies resonated with you, imagine what else 2,000 years of Stoic wisdom could unlock. Hit subscribe, and let's keep building that inner citadel together. One stone, one insight, one resilient step at a time. Because the world hasn't stopped being chaotic, but you're learning to move through it differently, and that changes